the search of former President Donald Trump's home at Mar-a-Lago in Florida.
Yeah, a source familiar with the situation tells NBC News that the search, which was executed through a warrant by the FBI, was tied to classified information that Trump allegedly took from the White House to Mar-a-Lago before leaving office in January of 2021. A senior U.S. official told NBC News that agents were at Trump's Florida residence for, quote, most of the day as they conducted the search. Now, Trump was not at Mar-a-Lago at the time of the search, and he can be seen here leaving Trump Tower last night here in New York City. The former president did release a statement following the search saying, quote, this unannounced raid on my home was not necessary or appropriate. One of Trump's lawyers, Christina Bobb, told NBC News she was present during the search. She shared this statement saying, quote, President Trump and his legal team have been cooperative with FBI and DOJ officials every step of the way. The FBI did conduct an unannounced raid and seized paper. We have full coverage this morning. In just a moment, NBC News legal analyst Danny Cevallos will break down the legal implications facing the former president. But we're going to start with retired FBI Special Agent Jeff Lanza and NBC News national correspondent Gabe Guiterrez, who's outside of Trump Tower in New York City. Good morning to both of you. And Gabe, I will start with you. So first, just give us an overview of this FBI search conducted at Mar-a-Lago yesterday. What were the agents specifically looking for?
Oh, well, hey there, Savannah. Good morning. Well, it's hard to know the full scope of this investigation since that search warrant has not been made public. But as you mentioned, according to a source familiar with the search, it was related to classified information former President Trump allegedly took with him to Mar-a-Lago after leaving the White House. Now, another source familiar with the search says that FBI agents seized several boxes of documents. And in February, the National Archives announced that classified material was discovered in 15 boxes of White House records that were stored at the estate, referring the matter to the Justice Department. Now, a Secret Service official tells NBC News that the agency was notified early on Monday of the FBI's intention to execute the search warrant, but the Secret Service did not participate in the search, simply facilitated access to the property yesterday. Savannah.
Jeff, I'll bring you in here. So walk us through how the FBI was able to gain a search warrant in order to go into Mar-a-Lago. I mean, what amount of probable cause did they need here? How much coordination was needed between the FBI and the Justice Department to pull this off?
Sure. So the FBI is the investigative arm of the Department of Justice. So it's very likely that the Attorney General, the head of the Department of Justice, as well as the head of the FBI, Christopher Wray, were involved in this decision to execute the search warrant. Now, but it's not a joint decision between those two agencies. It's approved by a federal judge. So the FBI does the investigation. They determine that there's enough probable cause to indicate that a crime is being committed or has been committed, and that there's evidence of that crime in the place to go into search. So that's all presented in an affidavit, which will eventually become public. In most cases it is, and then we'll learn more about that when that happens. But that's presented to a federal judge. The judge then decides if what's in the affidavit is based on fact, and if he agrees with the supposition, then the execution of the search warrant takes place. I mean, that's the process for any search warrant, whether you're talking about a former president, a member of the president's staff, or a citizen not associated with any government position.
Now, Gabe, how's his legal team responding to this search by the FBI? What have we heard?
Well, Savannah, former President Trump was here at Trump Tower yesterday. He ignored shouted questions from reporters after this story broke during a tele-rally, though, for former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin. He called this a strange day and another day in paradise. And in a written statement that he put out just before 7 o'clock Eastern last night, he claimed that this search was unannounced. He called it a raid. He portrayed himself as a victim of political persecution, adding, "They even broke into my safe." And the former president said it is prosecutorial misconduct, the weaponization of the justice system, and an attack by radical left Democrats who desperately don't want me to run for president in 2024. Savannah.
And Jeff, put this in context for us. Just how unprecedented is it to see the FBI execute a search like this on the home of a former president and potentially a candidate once again?
Yeah, well, it's extremely unusual, but it's not unprecedented when it comes to government officials. There's been other very high-level officials that have been the subject of search warrants, their properties, because of the potential or mishandling of national security documents. But remember this: it may be unprecedented, the location, but the crime itself is a very serious crime. I mean, we're talking about national security documents that are not under the control of the government, not in a protected area potentially, or one that would provide enough protection to keep them safe.
Jeff Lanza and Gabe Guiterrez, thank you so much. We appreciate you kicking us off this morning. Now let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Cevallos for more on this. Danny, good morning. So first, just tell us, what are the next steps here for the FBI?
Hard to say. It depends on what the purpose of the search warrant was, what the crime being investigated is, and what evidence they obtained at Mar-a-Lago. It may be the case that Donald Trump possibly isn't even the target of this criminal investigation. In other words, the mere existence of a search warrant does not necessarily mean that someone is about to be indicted. But it is definitely not a good thing for a client to have a search warrant executed at his home or his office. Mar-a-Lago for Trump is both home and office. So this is not a great sign. I mean, after all, a search warrant can also mean that the FBI didn't feel that a subpoena would do the job. They didn't want to place that trust in Trump and whoever else they wanted to serve the warrant on. And the FBI is essentially saying with a search warrant, no, we will conduct the search ourselves. We don't trust you to do it. We'll obtain it in secret and we'll execute it on surprise. That way, we will maximize the amount of evidence we find. I mean, that's why these are unannounced searches, for this exact reason, so that folks can't start flushing things down the toilet in anticipation of the FBI's arrival.
So, Danny, you make the important point that without actually seeing the search warrant, we don't know, what is the focus of an investigation here. But let's just say the former president, that Trump were to be the focus of an investigation by the FBI. What kind of legal issues could that potentially mean he'd be facing?
Well, reportedly, it seems that this has to do with supposedly taking classified documents out of the White House or away from the government, so to speak, and into a private home. Now, the interesting thing is Trump, as president, could have declassified those documents, but there's a difference between declassifying them and physically taking them away from the government, from the White House. So merely declassifying them, had he done so, if there's some secret Post-it note with I hereby declassify these documents, that might not excuse the fact that they were taken away from the government. And of course, there are federal statutes that criminalize removing property from the government. They're very vaguely drafted, but they would cover taking a banker's box full of documents out of the White House, arguably.
Now, could this search potentially, and I suppose whatever this is a bigger part of, lead to an indictment of Trump? And then, importantly, what does that mean about his prospects for running again in 2024?
Could it potentially? Yes. Is it likely? That's really hard to say, because the search warrant could hypothetically be related to other information that doesn't directly implicate Trump. A search warrant is not a necessary precursor to an indictment. It is a good sign that there's criminal activity afoot, because the FBI had to demonstrate to a magistrate, to a federal judge, that it's more likely than not that evidence of a crime exists at that property. So it's a sign that the FBI thinks somebody did something wrong. It doesn't necessarily mean Trump is that somebody, but of course, Mar-a-Lago is his office. It is his home. And if it was classified documents from the White House, he is or was the White House at one point. So you can draw inferences at this point, but until we know for sure, it's a difficult business to ascertain exactly what crimes are being investigated.
All right, Danny Cevallos, as always, thank you so much.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.